Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something quite practical. Constraint-based prompting for large language models. Now, if you followed the Generative AI Professional Prompt Engineering Guide, maybe you caught episode 4, Setting Boundaries.
Right, the companion piece.
Exactly. The core idea there was, well, setting boundaries using rules, limits, things like word count or style, to guide what the LLM spits out.
Yeah, to get more control.
So today we're going to build on that. We're pulling from the constraint-based definition chapter, really looking at the practical side. How do you actually combine these constraints? How do you prioritize them?
To get those really specific, tailored responses, yeah. It's moving past just asking an open-ended question.
Okay, so give me a feel for what that looks like in practice.
Well, think about a really complex topic. Let's say quantum computing.
Okay, tricky one.
Right. If you just ask the model, explain quantum computing, who knows what you'll get back? It could be pages long.
Could be anything, yeah.
But if you add a constraint, like explain quantum computing in under 40 words.
Ah, okay. Immediately sets a clear limit.
Exactly. Or imagine explaining photosynthesis, but maybe for like a 7-year-old.
Right. Simple language needed.
So you could add a constraint like use only words of 8 letters or less. That forces the model to simplify its vocabulary, you know?
That's quite specific. Does it always follow rules like that accurately?
It's surprisingly good, especially with clear numerical or structural rules, like asking for a haiku about autumn.
5, 7, 5 syllables.
Yep. That's a structural constraint, pure and simple. It forces a very specific form. Or summarizing something dense, like neural network backpropagation.
Okay.
You could say, summarize this in exactly 3 sentences and make sure you include the phrase gradient descent.
So you're layering constraints there: length, structure, and specific content inclusion.
Precisely. And that's where the real power starts to show up.
So when you're working with these models, what's really happening under the hood? Why does constraining them work so well?
It's actually quite interesting. It ties into a concept from decision theory, actually. Bounded rationality.
Bounded rationality.
Okay, break that down a bit.
So the idea is that humans, when we make decisions, we don't have perfect information or unlimited time or, frankly, unlimited brain power, right?
Makes sense. We work with what we've got.
Exactly. We operate within bounds, within limits. Constraints for an LLM kind of serve a similar function. They act as attention directors.
Attention directors.
Yeah. The model has access to this vast amount of information, this huge possibility space for generating text. Constraints help it filter all that down.
So it's like putting blinders on it in a good way, focusing its efforts.
Kind of, yeah. It helps the AI zero in on the information and the style that's actually relevant to your specific request, filtering out the noise. It makes the process much more efficient and targeted.
So it's not just about, say, cutting down the length. It's actively shaping the nature of the output. Exactly that. Think about it as guiding the distillation process. You're telling the model not just what to talk about, but how to shape that information.
Give me an example of that shaping.
Well, maybe you need summaries for social media posts. They need to be consistently short, punchy. A word count constraint does that.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're generating sections for technical documentation that needs a very specific level of clarity for a certain audience. Readability constraints or tone constraints help achieve that consistency.
So different constraints for different needs: audience, platform, company guidelines.
All of that. It ensures the output fits the required shape, whether that's about length, clarity, tone, or format. It's incredibly useful for tailoring content.
Okay, this sounds powerful. But when you're actually sitting down to write these prompts, what are the pitfalls? What advice do you give?
Right. Implementation. First thing, be precise. Really precise.
Oh, so?
Instead of saying something vague like keep it short, which is subjective.
Yeah. Short for who?
Exactly. Be specific. Use fewer than 50 words or maximum 3 paragraphs. Concrete numbers or structures work best.
Makes sense. Vague input, vague output.
Pretty much. Then, think carefully when you start combining multiple constraints.
Ah, yeah, I can see how that could get tricky.
It can. You might accidentally create conflicting demands, like asking for a highly technical explanation using only very simple words and keeping it under 20 words.
That sounds difficult. Maybe impossible.
It could be, yeah. The model might struggle or produce something nonsensical. So if you are using multiple rules, you often need to prioritize them.
Meaning decide which rule is the most important if they clash.
Exactly. Is the word count the absolute must-have, or is the simple language more critical? You need to tell the model, or at least structure the prompt, so it understands the hierarchy.
Okay, what else?
Test them out, especially complex combinations. Try a simpler prompt first, just focusing on the constraint itself to see if the model understands and applies it correctly before you use it in a big, complex task.
Good tip. Sort of debugging the constraint itself.
Kind of, yeah. Also, remember, it's not just about format. You need constraints for content, too. What topics to include, what to avoid.
Right. Both the what and the how.
And always, always keep your audience in mind. Constraints around complexity, jargon, reading level, Those are driven by who you're talking to.
That all sounds like solid advice.
Mm.
Now, the source material also mentions something called iterative refinement. How do constraints fit in with that process?
Yes. That's where things get really dynamic, actually. Iterative refinement is basically that back and forth process. You give a prompt, get a response, then you refine it with follow-up instructions.
Okay, like tweaking it.
Exactly. And constraints are perfect for that tweaking process. You might start with a relatively open request to get a first draft.
It's like draft a marketing email about our new product.
Right. You get something back. Then in your next prompt, you start adding constraints to shape it. Okay, now revise that, but focus specifically on small to medium businesses.
Adding an audience constraint.
Yep. And make sure the tone is friendly and informative and keep it under 150 words.
So you're layering constraints onto the previous output.
Exactly. You're using the constraints to steer the refinement, keeping the parts you like, but adjusting others within those new boundaries.
I can see how that would work for marketing copy. What about, say, technical stuff?
Same principle. You could ask for a summary of a technical paper.
Okay, get the first pass.
Then refine it. Okay, now add citations for the key claims. That's a content constraint. And also include a brief critique of the methodology, keeping the total summary under 500 words.
So you're adding structure, content requirements, and length limits iteratively.
Precisely. The initial constraints might set the broad stage, but the iterative process, using more constraints, lets you fine-tune and really chisel the output until it's exactly what you need while staying within those defined limits.
It sounds like a really controlled way to guide the AI towards a very specific goal.
It is. It's a very effective blend of broad generation and specific control.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. The big takeaway seems to be that constraint-based prompting is, well, a really powerful technique.
Definitely. For getting precise, tailored results from these LLMs, it's fundamental.
By being really clear about the rules, the length, the style, the audience, the format, you're essentially guiding the AI much more effectively.
Mm-hmm. You're moving beyond just asking for information, and you're starting to actively engineer the communication itself.
Engineer the communication. I like that framing.
Yeah, you're intentionally designing the limitations, the boundaries, so that what comes out aligns perfectly with what you actually need. It's about harnessing the power through thoughtful restriction.
Right. Which leads us to a final thought for everyone listening.
Yeah.
How could you start using these kinds of intentional constraints in your own work?
Yeah, think about the specific boundaries, length, tone, complexity, format that you could impose on an LLM to get more effective, more efficient, more useful results for your specific tasks.
Food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.